And we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. It's me, Jake Baldino, and today we're talking about Resident Evil 3. This remake of the 1999 classic is hot on the heels of a remake of Resident Evil 2, which was in the 90s one of my favorite games of all time, and honestly, again, became one of my favorite games of 2019. You guys probably know I'm a mega fan of the series. I basically grew up on it from the very start of it, so I have a special fondness for the original 3 games, so this might get a little complicated. Because this remake of Resident Evil 3 is a lot of fun, but no, it's not the heights of Resident Evil 2. It's really a thrilling ride with some shortcomings and concessions I don't agree with. Part of it is just the task of remaking the original. You know, the source material they were tasked with is very different than that of Resident Evil 2's, but I still think Resident Evil 2 just overall was pulled off a little better. Even still though, despite that, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as some people are saying. Resident Evil 2 was like a fine wine, man. You know, it's smart, it's pretty complex, lots of things you can get from it. Resident Evil 3 is a margarita, which isn't a bad thing, don't get me wrong, it's down for a good party time. Honestly, the way it worked, like Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 3 was the same in the 90s as it is now with the remakes. It's simpler, a little weird and imperfect, it's sweeter, you know, but the game is criminally short this go around. I'll get to it. Just so you know, this footage has been captured on PS4 Pro and some Xbox One X, and I've tried to keep it to mostly the early parts of the game just to avoid spoilers for you, because a lot happens all the time, basically. So in RE3, you're Jill Valentine during the events of the Raccoon City zombie outbreak incident, and you gotta get the hell out of the city. All the while, Umbrella's newest super weapon is relentlessly hunting you. I'm definitely keeping it simple, but that's the setup. I like this Jill Valentine. They give you a few extra minutes of setup at the start. They could have went a little further with it, but she feels like a great mix between a real person and the Jill you would actually believe exists in this universe and actually went through the Spencer Mansion incident from the first game. She's funny, she's sarcastic, but works in this like realistic but slightly over-the-top newer Resident Evil universe. Same goes for the supporting character Carlos. Cues taken from the original version of him, but less cringy, with a weird dash of Keanu Reeves' character from Speed. Is that just me? I don't know. The adventure, though, is highly cinematic with constant action set pieces, always pushing the game forward. It's pretty linear. There's some backtracking you can do as long as you don't progress too far and move ahead and lose it, and there are some environments that are a bit longer term explorable, but you still don't get that same sense of something like the police station or a mansion. This is a different beast. This is still survival horror. You know, you're still managing items, you're stressing over extremely limited ammo, but the game lets loose far more often and gives you opportunities for the big moments. There are explosive barrels and electrical panels this time to dispose of zombies, and you can do a small dash dodge from enemy attacks. And if you time it just right, you can get the upper hand. And you're gonna need the upper hand too, like with a lot of the crazier fun enemies and the great boss battles. This, of course, we got to acknowledge the nemesis, the big hulking brute who is basically a wrecking ball constantly pursuing Jill. Thankfully, and this is my opinion, of course, they didn't ruin him. Before the game released, they were very much like hyping up the moments where he was going to be like the Mr. X gameplay system on steroids. You know, like the character constantly roaming a map, chasing you down, but way more aggressive here. These unscripted moments are very early on in the game, and they don't add much. And there's not a lot of it. I actually found them the weakest points. These unscripted showdowns often felt a little bit awkward, especially when there were zombies in the mix and you would get punched by the nemesis and then the zombie will grab you, but then you would like clip through him, or he had this move where he pulls you in close and then he doesn't really do anything. Basically, it's not as cool or as tense as it sounds or as it should be, at least except for a couple of stressful moments. Pro tip though, definitely take him down in these sections so you can get weapon parts and stuff. Thank me later. But thankfully though, the game does not lose focus on the big story action moments where he busts in and then you're on the run. These like fully scripted scenes are still here, they're still the main focus, they're pretty frequent, they're all varied, and they have me saying holy shit out loud. The music, the fire effects, the buildings collapsing, all of it, the graphics, the way the nemesis looks, all of it is just so perfect for a Resident Evil fan. It's exactly what I wanted. Plus, like I said earlier, there are still some good moments of good old survival horror anxiety, especially with a certain few creatures in certain areas. These sequences were pretty stressful and challenging, but, you know, few and far between. Like I said, the game moves at a breakneck freaking pace. The same goes for the puzzles, too. There are very, very few Resident Evil style puzzles. The few I had, I did enjoy figuring out, but I wanted more. Like the original Resident Evil 3, the focus here, like I said, is on action and combat, and the weapons they give you definitely reflect that. It's fun to blow stuff up and mow down zombies, which have a few less gore effects on them this time around, but I still say, despite the shortcomings, they're still the best looking, best animated, scariest zombies in video games right now. Like, full stop. But the big budget, crazy cinematic action scenes seem to have come at a cost. There are substantial chunks of the original Resident Evil 3 that were cut or rearranged in a little bit more questionable ways. Biggest example, there's no interior clock tower anything. That hurts, man. I wanted to see that. There are a few other examples of stuff like that, like fan moment stuff that I don't want to spoil, but you might be bummed out. Still, I think for the most part, it actually helps with the way the story flows. I wish we spent more time with the characters, but it felt like there was no filler, at least. Like, if you can't tell, I'm really torn. I'm 50-50. Some of the changes and tweaks to locations and roles make sense. Some character changes and new connections are great, like, fantastic. But still, I wish there were more areas and other things. Like, I wish they tried to give more modern spins on certain older things instead of just leaving them behind. Especially because, like, as a remake, there is still some really cool, respectful nods to the original, down to an alley with sidewalk chalk that was burned into my brain from the original game. Stuff like that. I really wish it retained the choice decision-making stuff from the original game, too. Here, it's all straightforward, and there's only one ending. The last moments of the game are massively improved, though, like the final moments. Even if one or two things I was hoping for didn't quite happen, still, yeah, it's satisfying, definitely, like as a big cinematic moment. Stay till after the credits, too. Now, here's the deal, guys. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Keep in mind, I'm a big fan, and I played an insane amount of 2, but I finished Resident Evil 3 in my first playthrough in, like, well under 5 hours. That's really short. To be fair, Resident Evil games are actually shorter than people realize and totally encourage replayability. But the way it worked, the pace for this one and the cut content made it not only actually short, but it feels short. To be completely fair, though, I immediately jumped back in on a harder difficulty to play again because I found it a little too easy the first time, and I'm still having fun because I love those big moments. But it's not as replayable as some other games in the series, and there's a few less incentives. This time around, though, after beating it, you do unlock a shop where you can spend milestone points that you unlock throughout the game to then gain special items, like some of the cool classic weapons you'd come to expect, and skins and stuff. I think it's a fine replayability incentive. It's okay. All of this helps, but, there's no beating around the bush. The game just feels brief. It doesn't feel like a spanning epic, the length doesn't usually bother me for games. You guys know, I don't always bring this up unless it's really bad. I have a high tolerance for shorter games. I still recommend playing this one, absolutely, but just be aware. When are you going to get it? When are you going to play it? It's a short, slightly flawed ride. But it is a ride. It goes upside down and does loop-de-loops and most of the stuff you'd hope for, at least. I guess it helps that the game includes the asymmetrical standalone multiplayer game, Resident Evil Resistance. It's essentially a little Left 4 Dead survival trial. You get to go through the levels as a group of survivors, each player playing a unique character with some different traits and stuff. Objectives are usually like get to the exit or find the right items to get the door to open, stuff like that. You fight all manner of zombies and creatures, but it's someone else controlling them. Another player. One person actually plays as the mastermind and sets traps and attempts to slow players down, all observed through security cameras and stuff. Plus, you can jump into certain creatures like a zombie and control them, and that's surprisingly fun. I've had a lot of pre-release experience with this. Some of this gameplay is a few weeks old, just so you know, but I actually like it more than I thought I would. I wasn't into the idea when it was announced, but now at least I find it like some fun way to pass the time. Will I forget about it? Probably. Is it going to be the next esport? Probably not, but I'm curious to see if the Resident Evil community embraces it, because we're an odd bunch. So yeah, ultimately there is some issues with this Resident Evil 3 remake. It's not a flawless gem, it misses a couple of important things, but ultimately it is still a hell of a good time. I can guarantee you, whether you buy it half price, you play it a couple months later, you're gonna have a really good time playing through it. And I'm still, if anything, more excited about the future of this Resident Evil remake universe, if that makes sense. I really can't wait to see what they do next and how they do it. But that's a before you buy. You know how this works by now. I gave you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion. And of course, I want to hear yours down in the comments below. Resident Evil 3 fans, let's talk, man. There's so much to say. I've always been a little bit partial to 2. I have a little bit more fondness for it, but for those who grew up with 3 specifically, I know some people really love it. I want to know what you guys think as well. Some people, 3 was their first introduction to Jill, so I want to know what you're thinking for this. Let's talk about anything Resident Evil 3, and also, if you're playing Resident Evil Resistance, I want to hear what you guys think about that. Let's talk about anything down in the comments. But if this gameplay helped you, maybe you learned something, clicking the like button is the best way you can help us out, man. We'd really appreciate that. But if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. Either way, though, stay healthy. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.